Yeah, well, the first reason why they're wrong is because my Bitcoin is not for sale, right? And so it doesn't matter what price somebody offers me, I'm not selling the Bitcoin. And so the greater fool theory would be that I bought it at a low price and somebody's going to pay me at a higher price and I'm going to give it to them. But that's just not the case. And it's not the case for many Bitcoiners. What they've done is they've fundamentally shifted from a dollar denominated world to a Bitcoin denominated world. And I think that's a really key piece. And you see this in the data in terms of 60+% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in the last 12 months, even though there's been hundreds of percent of upside, there's been 50% drawdowns in a single 24-hour period. Through all of that volatility, 60+% hasn't moved. And so these people have a very deep-seated belief that this is an asset they're going to hold for the long period of time, regardless of what happens to the US dollar exchange value of it. And I think that when you start to really look at how do you value something like this, price is simply a determinant of supply and demand, right? And the beauty of this asset compared to most markets is that if we look at other assets, we essentially have to do work and our best estimate as to what the supply will be and also what the demand will be, right? There's two inputs into the equation to determining the price today and then what the price will be in the future. When it comes to Bitcoin, one side of that equation is not a variable, right? We know with 100% certainty because we can verify in the code exactly what the total supply of Bitcoin is, what the circulating supply is, and what the daily incoming supply is. And so that verifiability of the actual supply side of the equation means that we have 100% certainty and we can kind of know what that input is. What that then leads to is an analysis on the demand side of the equation. And what people then want to speculate about or debate about is why is demand increasing? Why will demand continue to increase? And I think that that's where you get the spectrum of arguments, everything from store value to medium of exchange. I personally believe that Bitcoin is at least a 10x better improvement in the technology from a store value standpoint than gold. Many people probably think it's even higher than that, could be 100x or better. And so when you see that kind of very significant improvement from a technology standpoint and a store value, what you're going to find is more and more capital will flow into the asset. And as demand increases for a fixed supply asset with a known supply schedule, the price will continue to appreciate. And so 5-6 years ago, you could have made the argument, hey, there's not a lot of trading volume. This is kind of a speculative asset. The market may be manipulated. All of these kind of detractions that I think a lot of people did make. Today, when you kind of fast forward, what you find is you've got an asset that has tens of billions of dollars in daily volume. It's on regulated exchanges. It's held by many of the kind of most well-respected financial institutions in the United States. And the price has pretty healthy, pretty high volume price discovery. And so what I think Bitcoin is worth is obviously what the market has determined. Today that's sitting around $36,000, $37,000. And then the big question is just how deep is your conviction that demand will continue to increase in the future and price will kind of be a proxy or a result of that increase in demand. Yeah, so when we talk about kind of banning something, what you essentially are doing is you're essentially creating a law that's highly unenforceable. But a law that would say, if you are within a geographic boundary, if you're a citizen of a specific country, you are not allowed to interface with this open decentralized protocol. And so the way that I usually talk about this is the internet is an open decentralized protocol. And so there are countries who have kind of banned the internet, right? North Korea is a great example. If you are a citizen of North Korea, you cannot use the internet. That hasn't worked out so well for that country. And so regardless of any one country's viewpoint on banning or not banning, the open digital decentralized protocol is going to be used by people, right? It's out there, you can't shut it down. And so it is going to be adopted. And so countries have a choice. They can either choose to be pessimistic and they can choose to ban the participation of their citizens, or they can be innovative and optimistic. And they can say, actually, if anyone's going to benefit from this, we should be the ones that benefit the most. And therefore we should go and we should embrace this. And so when you kind of go around a geographic map, if you look at something like China, China has essentially taken the stance that we're not huge fans of this Bitcoin thing. We're going to create our own digital currency. We're going to take some of the principles of it, but we want control. We want to be able to surveil it. We want to be able to control it. And so we'll see how that plays out, but I tend to think that won't be a great outcome. But you can see that there is a theme here of countries like China or North Korea who are banning their citizens from participating in that open decentralized protocol. If you look at something like India, there's a legislation that's recently been proposed that would outlaw the participation in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. The legislation is actually misinformed in that they call them private currencies, but there's nothing private about it. It's an open, kind of publicly available. Anyone with an internet connection can interface with this, and so you can't actually enforce a ban. But what you can do is you can threaten people and all of that. What we know is that when a country does ban their participation, you can look at somewhere like Pakistan, who banned the participation in Bitcoin, but a key thing happened. Adoption went up and not down. And so even though they proposed and eventually passed legislation that banned their citizens from participating, it actually drove more adoption, not less. And this came from not only mining it, right, from a cash flow perspective, but also people who wanted to participate in the digital economy, who wanted to freelance, who wanted to kind of do work and get paid. Well, in Pakistan, they can't get paid in some other currencies. And so Bitcoin became this kind of censorship resistant way to ensure that they got paid for their goods and services. And so I think that is kind of a word of caution for people in the United States. And, there's folks, everyone from some politicians to people in the regulatory world, all the way to Wall Street, asset managers who believe that America should ban Bitcoin. And what I continue to say is that couldn't be more of an anti-American view of the world, right? The view that, hey, there's a piece of technology. That piece of technology is going to be used by people all around the world, regardless of if they are our enemy or our friend. But we, as in the United States, are going to select to opt out, to prevent our citizens from embracing this new piece of innovative technology because we deem that some other country may benefit from it as well. And so people who are advocating for the banning of Bitcoin are no different than people who would be advocating for the banning of the internet in the United States. They essentially are asking the US government to sanction US citizens, to cut us off from this new digital global financial system. And not only do I think it's un-American, I think it's a dangerous point of view, right? It's a misinformed point of view. And so I think that what we're going to end up with is we've now got Bitcoiners in Congress. We've got Bitcoiners on the Senate Banking Committee. We've got Bitcoiners inside many of the largest financial institutions in the United States. We even have Bitcoiners who are running some of these regulatory bodies. And where I think we're going to end up is exactly where we should. We're going to embrace it. We're going to realize this is a disruptive piece of innovation technology, and it's an open, decentralized protocol that everyone in the world is going to have access to. And so if America wants to retain their position of leadership on a global stage, we should take every step possible to make sure that we use it to further that position rather than try to somehow inhibit our growth and our future innovation potential by banning it. And so I think that the fiat currencies are going to get digitized. They're not going to necessarily be competitive from a zero-sum game with something like Bitcoin. In fact, they're actually going to be very additive. They're going to drive adoption of digital wallets, and they're going to drive down the friction of the switching costs between currencies. And I think that in that environment, Bitcoin ends up being the greatest beneficiary because what it has is it has the digital application of sound money principles. That if anything as we've been taught over time is that capital will flow to the soundest, hardest money. And that's what Bitcoin is. And so I think that we want the governments to go and digitize their currencies because it will ultimately really benefit those who are working in this digital decentralized world.